The evening didn't begin with noise or drama, it began with control, the kind of quiet, calculated control that only comes from someone who already owns the outcome. My estate manager called me at exactly 11 a.m. on a slow Tuesday, her voice shaking just enough to tell me something was wrong. She said a booking had just been confirmed for the Vintners Pavilion, a high-profile event under the name of the Chen Legacy launch. But then she paused, like she wasn't sure she should say the next part out loud. I told her to read the note exactly as written. There was a moment of silence, then she said it, carefully, like it might explode in her hands. Under no circumstances is the owner's wife, Nicole Chen, to be informed or admitted to the property. My pulse didn't rise. Not even a flicker. Panic is for people who don't hold the deed, and I held everything. I tightened my grip on the phone and told her calmly to let the reservation stand exactly as it was. She sounded shocked, almost confused, because she was expecting anger, maybe even tears instead. She got instructions. I opened the booking file on my screen and reviewed the details like a transaction, not an insult. Standard gold package. $42,000. It wasn't enough, not for what they were trying to do. Not for the level of delusion it took to host a party on my estate and pretend I didn't exist. So I adjusted the numbers, quietly, precisely, moved them to platinum, opened the 1980 to reserve vault, add the white truffle course, include the beluga caviar station. Every upgrade was intentional, every detail sharpened. My manager hesitated, asking if the client had approved the increase. I told her not to worry about approval. I knew Elizabeth Chen better than she knew herself. She would never ask the price in front of her circle. Pride would handle that part for me. And just like that, the estimate climbed from $42,000 to $55,000. It wasn't revenge, it was a lesson. I hung up and stared at the calendar for days. For days, to let them walk directly into the trap they thought was a celebration. Most people would have rushed over, demanded answers, tried to fix things emotionally. But emotion clouds strategy. I had learned long ago that when someone is making a mistake, you don't interrupt them, you let them finish. And Elizabeth was about to finish a very expensive mistake. That quiet gave me time to think. Not about the party, but about the years that led to it. People always ask why someone stays in a situation like that for so long. They think it must be love, or weakness, or fear. It's none of those things. It's gradual, it's slow, like heat rising 1 degree at a time. When I first met Christopher, I was already building something real. He had a polished name, a polished smile, and no actual foundation. His parents saw me as temporary, too ambitious, too sharp, too new. At first, it was small things, comments disguised as compliments, invitations that somehow forgot my name. Then it grew. Exclusion became routine. Disrespect became normal, and I stayed. Not because I didn't see it, but because I believed endurance would earn respect. I believed that if I carried enough weight, eventually they would acknowledge it. Instead, I became invisible. I funded everything quietly, their business losses, their debts, their lifestyle. I turned my success into silence so my husband could feel like the center of his own story. I became the structure behind the walls, unseen but essential. And they treated me like I was the flaw in the design. But something shifted when I saw that invoice. $55,000 for a night they believed they controlled. That was the moment I realized the heat had gone too far, and unlike before, I wasn't going to adjust, I was going to act. 2 days before the event, Christopher came home carrying a carefully chosen gift bag, his expression rehearsed, almost guilty. He placed it on the counter without meeting my eyes. A weekend at a luxury spa, he said, a break. Time to relax. Specifically, that weekend, the same weekend as the launch. I leaned against the counter and asked him, calmly, why he wanted me. Gone during the biggest event of his family's year. He hesitated, then gave me the answer his mother had prepared for him: optics, tradition, image. He said my presence might confuse investors. He said it gently, like that would make it less insulting. I waited for him to correct himself, to laugh, to say he didn't believe it, but he didn't. He stood there asking me to disappear so they could play their roles in a world I built. And in that moment, everything became very simple. I wasn't looking at my husband anymore. I was looking at a liability. So I smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but sharply enough to cut through his relief. I told him he was right. I told him I would go. I told him to handle the legacy. He relaxed immediately, thanked me, and walked away thinking the problem was solved. But I wasn't going to the spa. I packed my bag and moved into the owner's suite instead. Out of sight, just like he wanted, invisible, just like they expected. Saturday night arrived wrapped in golden light, the kind that usually makes everything feel perfect. But I wasn't there to admire it. I stood behind the one-way glass in the owner's suite, watching everything unfold below me. The pavilion was glowing. My staff had executed flawlessly. every table, every glass. Every detail exactly as designed. Elizabeth stood at the center of it all, smiling, laughing, playing the role of someone who believed she owned the room. Robert beside her, confident and loud, Christopher near the bar, pretending calm. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. They were drinking my wine, standing on my floors, celebrating a legacy funded entirely by me. On the screen in front of me, the numbers climbed in real time. Every refill, every broken glass, every indulgence added to the total. 56,000, 57, 58. It was almost fascinating watching people celebrate inside a system they didn't understand, spending money they didn't have, assuming control they never possessed. My phone vibrated softly in my hand. A message from my lawyer, everything prepared, everything ready, one signal away from consequences. I looked down through the glass at the room below, at the illusion they had built for themselves. And I didn't feel anger, I felt clarity, because the most dangerous person in any room is never the loudest one, it's the one no one notices. The one who sees everything. The one who waits, and I was still watching from the dark with my finger on the trigger. The feedback wed, silencing the crowd. He smiled. That practiced politician's smile I used to admire. He was about to make the speech. He was about to tell 50 of the wealthiest investors in the valley that the Chen family was a fortress of stability. He was about to lie to the wrong room. I set my iPad down and stood up. The silence in my suite was absolute. Down there it was a party, up here it was an execution. Robert Chen had a voice made for lying, deep, resonant, and utterly convincing. He stood at the podium, gripping the edges like a statesman, and told 50 people that the Chen family dry cleaners was a pillar of independent wealth. He used words like solvent, robust, and debt-free. From my vantage point in the dark, I almost laughed. Debt-free. I had the wire transfer receipts on my laptop screen. That proved I had personally covered their payroll taxes 3 months ago. To keep the IRS from seizing their assets, he wasn't just embellishing, he was committing fraud. And he was doing it into a microphone while being recorded. He gestured to a man sitting in the front row, a sharp-looking gentleman in a navy suit named Mr. Sterling. Robert introduced him as the managing partner of the Helios Group, the firm that was about to acquire the family business and cement the Chen legacy. The crowd applauded. Robert beamed, soaking in the admiration. He looked at Mr. Sterling, expecting a nod of validation. He expected the check. But Robert didn't know the most important detail of the night. The Helios Group was a shell company, and Mr. Sterling wasn't a managing partner. He was my chief financial officer. I watched the scene unfold with the detached precision of a surgeon. Robert leaned into the mic and delivered the closing line of his con. And that is why with this merger, we are guaranteeing a profitable future for the next generation, completely unencumbered by outside liabilities. Mr. Sterling didn't clap. He didn't smile. Slowly, deliberately, he turned in his chair. He didn't look at Robert. He didn't look at the crowd. He tilted his head back and looked directly up at the dark panel of glass where I was standing. The room went quiet. The guest followed his gaze, staring up at the blank reflective window of the owner suite. They couldn't see me, but Mr. Sterling knew exactly who was pulling the strings. He was waiting for the signal. Robert faltered, his smile twitching. Mr. Sterling, is something wrong? I looked down at the man my in-laws had spent the entire night trying to impress. They had wined him and dined him on my dime, lied to him about assets they didn't have, and insulted the very person who signed his paycheck. It was time to close the theater. My thumb hovered over the send button on my phone. I typed a single message to Mr. Sterling. Kill it. Down below, Mr. Sterling checked his watch, stood up, and interrupted the speech. His voice was calm, projecting clearly across the silent room. I apologize, Robert. But in light of the financial discrepancies revealed in your speech regarding the company's debt status, Helios is withdrawing the offer immediately. The gasp that went through the room sucked the air out of the pavilion. Robert looked like he had been shot. Withdrawing, but we have a deal. We had a deal based on transparency, Sterling said, smoothing his jacket. We do not acquire liabilities disguised as asset. The facade didn't just crack, it shattered. I watched Elizabeth grip the tablecloth, her face draining of color. Christopher froze, his glass halfway to his mouth. They stood amidst the ruin of their own lies, confused and terrified. They still didn't understand. They thought they had just lost a business deal. They were about to find out they had lost much more than that. I set my phone down, walked to the door of the suite, and punched in the security code. The lock disengaged with a heavy thud. It was time to go downstairs. The sound of my heels clicking against the marble staircase echoed like gunshots. In the silent pavilion, I walked slowly, letting them see me, the woman they had banned, the wife they had hidden, the liability they had tried to erase. Elizabeth was the first to recover from the shock, her face twisted into a mask of desperate indignation. She hissed at the nearest security guard, "Remove her, she is trespassing on a private event." The guard didn't move, he didn't even blink. He looked at Elizabeth, then looked at me and gave a sharp, respectful nod. "Good evening, Mrs. Chen," he said. I walked past Elizabeth without breaking stride and stepped up to the microphone. That Robert had just abandoned. I looked out at the 50 guests, the bankers, the investors, the socialites. "I apologize for the confusion," I said. My voice steady. "My in-laws seem to be under the impression that they hosted this event. But the truth is, you are all guests at the Obsidian Estate. My estate. The wine you are drinking is from my vines, the food you are eating is from my kitchen. And the security team standing at the doors answers to me." I turned to face Elizabeth. She looked small, all the pomp and circumstance had drained out of her, leaving just an old woman in a borrowed venue. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the folded invoice. I walked over and placed it gently in her trembling hands. $55,000. I said softly, so only she and Christopher could hear. "That covers the vintage reserves you opened, the platinum upgrades you ordered, and the venue fee you thought you could waive." Elizabeth stammered, We can't pay this, you know. We don't have this kind of cash." "I know," I said. "I also know you haven't had solvency in a decade. I know because I'm the one who paid your property taxes in 2015. I'm the one who covered your legal fees in 2018, for 20 years. I have been the invisible line item in your ledger that kept you from bankruptcy, but this bill," I tapped the paper. "This isn't just for the wine, Elizabeth. Consider this the invoice for my absence. You wanted a party without me, you have to pay the full price of admission. My subsidies are officially canceled." Christopher stepped forward, finding his voice at the worst possible moment. "Nicole, please. Not here, we can fix this at home." I looked at my husband, I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing the lifestyle I provided. "There is no home, Christopher, not for us." I pulled the second envelope from my clutch, the divorce papers, and pressed them against his chest. "I'm done being the foundation you drill into. I'm taking my land back." I turned to leave. I didn't look back to see if they were crying. I didn't care, but as I reached the heavy oak doors, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Brandon and Ashley. My son took off his tie and threw it on a table. My daughter wiped off the lipstick her grandmother had forced her to wear. "We're driving with you, Mom," Brandon said. Ashley just took my hand and squeezed it. We walked out into the cool night air, leaving the Chen family to explain to 50 guests why they couldn't pay the bill. In the months that followed, the Chen legacy collapsed with breathtaking speed. Without my anonymous capital injections, the dry cleaning chain was liquidated within 90 days. The country club memberships were revoked. The social standing they were up evaporated. It turns out their entire empire was a shared hallucination that only existed because I allowed it to. I used to wonder what would have happened if I had left sooner. I used to think the world would fall apart without me, but standing on my balcony 6 months later, watching the sunrise over the grapes that bear my name, I realized the truth. The world didn't fall apart, their illusion did. I built a real empire on this dirt rooted in hard work and truth. They built a castle on a cloud, and they were surprised when gravity finally kicked in. I took a sip of coffee and breathed in the silence. It didn't smell like loneliness anymore. It smelled like victory. If you've ever been the invisible glue holding a thankless family together, this story is for you. Share this if you're done paying the price for people who can't afford your value. Subscribe for more stories of justice served.